All right, hello and welcome to the continued essay instructional guide process here in our classes of the channel. So the first thing is, originally this was done as a classroom instruction. I stood in front and I wrote it all down, but unfortunately, because the way we're structured, some of us were not a part of that. So it's important that I record these so that you can then get the instruction that you needed on the pieces and the parcels of building your essay. So the first part that we're going to kind of dig into is the foundation of the paper, the thesis. If you need, you'll need to have this with you. It's the thesis kind of art essay kind of thing, and it's 4 pages or so. And we're just going to kind of go through the notes that you need to take so you can have the information. This is notes that you will keep with you as we continue our essay work. So in case you need to reference back to pieces and parcels of like what kind of essays we're doing or how do you write a thesis, this will be very helpful to you. So I would encourage you to hold on to this, keep this, so that when we do start writing essays, that you'll have it to kind of pull your sources. First is types of papers. So this is the 3 types of papers, aka essays, that we're going to be talking about here. The first is an analytical paper. And yes, you do need to write this in number 1. So number 1 would be analytical paper, and then there's like those 4 or 5 lines, and that's where you need to write the definition of the analytical paper there on the sheet of paper you have in front of you. So an analytical paper breaks down an issue or an idea into its component parts, and it evaluates the issue or idea and presents the breakdown and evaluation to the audience. So an example would be if I was going to the issue of the Electoral College in the United States right now, and the question of whether or not we need to continue using the Electoral College or we should do something else. So an analytical paper would analyze the issue of the Electoral College and the different beliefs, be it should have it, shouldn't have it, or we should revise it, and that would be your paper. You would analyze the Electoral College and the ongoing theories from different groups of whether or not it should continue. You would present their perspectives. You would bring evidence from research, from news stories, and things of that sort, and you would give that in an analytical paper. So basically, an analytical paper is you're analyzing. So you can take any book, any piece of literature, any poem, any kind of thing that has been created, and you can analyze it. You can analyze, for example, Harry Potter. You can analyze the use of Hermione as a feminist icon, or you could analyze Hermione. Is she independent enough, or is she too dependent on, Harry and Ron? Is there a dynamic there that's unhealthy? Like, there's so much analyzation that you could do with anything that you read, consume, view, etc., that the analytical paper is really a good place to go, because you can analyze with your own interpretation and then with evidence, and you can basically have an idea, a perspective on something through them analyzing the literature. So an analytical paper breaks down an issue or an idea into its component parts, which is just different pieces, and evaluates the issue or idea, and then presents that breakdown and evaluation to the audience, which the audience is the reader. In this case, it's me as your teacher. An expository paper, so this is number 2, is expository paper. That, and the definition of it, it explains something to the audience. So something we'll do here in a little bit, and what most of our classes did in person was we came up with a thesis statement for an expository paper on Calvin and Hobbs. We've been using Calvin and Hobbs a lot in the classroom just as a reference and as a way to kind of use it to construct ideas and things of that sort. And so Calvin and Hobbs, our students in the in-person classes created thesis statements using Calvin and Hobbs as the foundation. So we would read Calvin and Hobbs for 15, 20 minutes, and then we would go, okay, here's what I think. There's the bell for class. This is what we need to do. This is how I want to evaluate Calvin and Hobbs. And so an explanatory paper would explain Calvin and Hobbs, and so you would then choose what you wanted to explain about Calvin and Hobbs to the audience. The analytical paper using Calvin and Hobbs you would analyze Calvin and Hobbs, and you would analyze what does Calvin mean? What does he represent? And there's been a lot of theories on what Calvin represents. What does Hobbes represent? There's been a lot of conversation and analysis on Hobbes. You could take it even further and go, well, what does Calvin's mom and dad represent? And is it, what do they explicitly represent? Like the explicit black and white, straightforward. And what is the implicit meaning and translation and analyzation of Calvin and Hobbes' parents? What do they represent beyond just the surface level stuff? And you could even do his sometimes frenemy and sometimes sort of flirtation, Susie, and then there's Mo, the bully, and then there's the teacher. And so an analytical paper would break down and investigate those parts, whereas an expository, explanatory essay would explain and give the reader information that they may not have known. Expository papers, it's not that they're simple, but that they're more laid out in their process. Analyzing literature takes work, and it's good work, but it does take work. Your third essay is an argumentative paper or argumentative essay. So this is number 3, which is argumentative. And this definition is a little bit long. So an argumentative paper makes a claim about a topic and justifies this claim with specific evidence. The claim could be an opinion, a proposal, an evaluation, a cause and effect statement, or an interpretation. And you can actually leave the last part of that off. I'm actually going to change that right now as we sit here, just because that's not the right. That's a little bit too far there. Nobody's ever perfect, and I never want you to think that I'm perfect in what I do. So let's fix that. So we'll go back to types of essays. All right, so that kind of cleans up our argumentative essay definition. So our argumentative paper makes a claim about a topic and then justifies this claim with specific evidence. The claim, it can be a lot of different things, and that's why a lot of people enjoy argumentative essays, because it gives them a lot of options. It's like a Swiss Army knife. The claim could be an opinion. It could be, I think this about that. A policy proposal, I think we need to change how we do this. An evaluation, I'm evaluating the success of the DARE program in schools, the anti-drug program. A cause and effect statement, there's not enough to do in Fort Morgan, and so our students are turning to things that are not positive and are not healthy, and that is causing issues. Or an interpretation. You could interpret the data on crime stats. You could interpret the data on any number of things in a community or in a situation, and then interpret that data to give your opinion or your perspective or your thinking on what that means. So an argumentative paper is it's deep and it's complex. It's not to say that the others aren't, but there's a lot of moving parts in an argumentative paper because you're really going into it with detail. So we have analytical as number 1. There's your definition. Expository is number 2. There's your definition. It's a very short definition. The argumentative is the longer one. That's number 3. But number 3, argumentative, and then your definition is makes a claim about a topic and justifies his claim with specific evidence. The claim could be any of those things. So those are 3 types of papers that you'll write here in our class. And you won't always write just one or the other. By the time you graduate from Lincoln, you'll have written at least, you'll have written all 3 of them in some way or form. Okay? If you need to pause and continue taking notes, feel free to do so. Okay. Next is characteristics of a thesis, and it's simple 1, 2, 3. Your thesis statement should be specific. It should only cover what you will discuss in your paper and should be supported by your evidence. So we are on that one right there, the characteristics of a thesis. Your thesis statement, number 1, should be specific. It should cover only what you will discuss in your paper and should be supported with specific evidence. So when we construct our thesis statements, this is what we're putting together our plan for the paper. It's almost our map for our writing of our essay. And then when I say paper and essay, those are interchangeable in this conversation. When you get to college, they're generally called papers, like you're writing a paper or an essay paper. So again, number 1, thesis should be specific. Make sure you write all of that in number 1. Number 2, the thesis statement usually appears at the end of the first paragraph of a paper. Now, you may have already gone through. If you haven't already, you can go to that next. But the introduction is what comes before the thesis. The introduction is kind of the movie trailer. And then the thesis is, all right, here's what I'm doing, and here's how I'm going to do it. So the thesis statement is, again, that front loading of what's coming in the next couple of paragraphs for this paper that I'm writing. So the thesis statement usually appears at the end of the first paragraph of the paper after the introduction, which, again, if you need that video, you can find it on my channel. Number 3, your topic may change as you write, so you may need to revise your thesis statement to reflect exactly what you have discussed in the paper. Again, that's number 3 on characteristics of an essay, or of a thesis, sorry. This happens. You come up with a thesis, you think, okay, I've got it constructed, and then you start doing research. You start kind of Googling around and going, oh, well, I'm not sure about this. And as you start to write your paragraphs, you start to go, ooh, I'm starting to there's starting to be a shift in the topic and the conversation that I'm having about whatever it is that I'm doing. Don't be afraid to go back and kind of modify the thesis in slight ways. You shouldn't. The danger of that's the good. The other side of the pendulum is if you find that suddenly you have to rewrite your thesis completely, so it's changed from one thing to another 180 degrees. That may be a time to raise your hand and be like, "Hey, Aaron, I'm concerned of what's going on here. I'm switching a little bit too much," and then I'm going to be like, "Okay, cool. Let's work that out. Let's figure that out." So it might change a little. It might shift, and that's okay. As writers, we're learning. We're always constantly evolving in our skills and our talents and our researching and all these things. You're going to sometimes go, "Ooh, I'm going to have to shift this a little bit," and that's okay. So don't panic. Don't freak out. Don't be like, "Oh, I'm a terrible writer." No, you're just figuring out, "Oh, I need to shift this around a little bit." Things change as you write. And that's the beauty of revising. We are always revising our writing. If we want to be stronger writers, we always have to be open to revising and then eventually editing our work as well. I'll let you pause here if you need to, so that you can get those notes. Pause if you need, and we'll continue on. So the next thing are some examples of different statements. And it's going to ask you, the paper that follows should. And so you have to evaluate the thesis and kind of, as a reader, go, what am I going to get out of this? What's coming down the line? The power of a really great thesis is that if you write it well and you write it clearly with clarity, there will be no doubt in your reader or audience's mind of what's coming. And that's what you want. You want your thesis statement to be very clear, very detailed, and very much able to be read for, okay, I know what I'm getting into. But also that as you begin your arguments in your paragraphs, that the reader and the audience goes, yep, this is what the thesis statement told me was going to happen. Nothing's changed. Okay, that thesis statement in the introduction, as I've talked about in other videos, it all has to have a common thread. Everything has to flow. There can't be some random left field thing that just kind of doesn't fit within the structure that you've built. Because if you're building the foundation, you're building some walls in our metaphorical essay house, and all of a sudden you throw in an elevator that wasn't in the original design, people can be like, whoa, what are you doing? And your reader's going to be just confused. Your contractor's going to be just confused. Everyone's going to be like, what is happening? You got to be very mindful in your essay that it needs to be a consistent and constant theme of everything that you're talking about. If you write something that doesn't really it kind of violates your thesis statement, that's when you need to take a step back and go, ooh, okay, what am I doing? Or, hey, Aaron, I think I've got a problem here. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. And I'll be like, okay, cool. Let's figure that out. Let's see what's going on, and I'll game plan with you and make a plan going forward. So these are examples, and I'll walk you through a little bit what the papers that follows should. And again, we're on this little sheet of paper, and we're on the example of an analytical thesis statement. An analysis of the college admission process reveals one challenge facing counselors: accepting students with high test scores or students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. That's already written for you. You don't have to write that. But the question to ask you is what should the paper that follows be doing? The papers that follow should. So if we look at this and we go, okay, as a reader, what are we going to be having? Well, we look for action words. We look for verbs. And the first one it's 2 words in, analysis. So we know there's going to be an analysis, but analysis of what? Well, they're going to be analyzing the college admission process. That's the first part of what's going to happen. So the essay that follows, if we're using our context clues and looking at it, the paper that follows should explain the analysis of the college admission process. Because, as you notice, there's a second part of it. So the analysis of college admission process reveals, and it shows you the one challenge facing counselors, accepting students with da-da-da-da. So in an analytical thesis statement, there's going to be pieces, because you can't just say, hey, the challenge is accepting there's a challenge, and it's accepting students with high test scores or students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. Well, okay, that's a challenge, but why is that a challenge, and what did you do to figure that out? Well, in the analytical thesis statement, it tells you, we did an analysis of the college admission process, and through that analysis of that process, we discovered something that's really concerning for us as a writer, and that is da-da-da-da-da-da. So the beauty of it is that it's almost like a 1-2 punch. Like, here's the analysis, and here, boom, here's what we found out when we did the analysis. So the paper is going to explain the analysis of the college admission process. Then, this is number 2 underneath the paper that follows should, it's going to explain the challenge facing admissions counselors. And those two things are going to be very much interconnected. Those things, the challenge facing college admissions counselors, is always going to come back to that analysis. They're always going to refer to each other. They're always going to connect, because one was born of the other. It's the chicken and the egg. but it's not. They're almost twins. They're almost Siamese twins. Like, they can't be pulled apart. They have to go together in everything that is written in this paper. This would be a very interesting paper to write, and also to read, because I'd be very curious about how the challenges of accepting students with high test scores or students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. Why is that hard? Is it hard to decide what is a strong extracurricular background or what quantifies a high test score? And that would be a very interesting paper to read, because the college process is fascinating. It's hard, it's challenging, it's stressful, and that might reveal some things for us as well. So that's an analytical thesis statement that we have there. If you need to catch up on notes, go ahead and feel free to pause. Next is example of an expository, explanatory thesis statement. So remember, these are the essays that explain things. So the example that we have is, the life of a typical college student is characterized by time spent studying, attending class, and socializing with peers. Now, explanatory essays are traditionally the ones where you're going to find those three kind of things. So you see we have, characterized by time spent studying, attending class, socializing with peers. Those are your three reasons, or those are your three things. Those are going to be your three-ish paragraphs. Sometimes with deeper conversations and deeper content, you do have to expand it beyond just the three standard paragraphs, the 5-paragraph essay. It's okay to break loose of that mold. If you're talking about a topic, for example, time studying, and you have a lot more to add and you don't want to create a monster paragraph, you can transition to another paragraph and has to continue to have that conversation so that your reader doesn't feel like they're just reading one big paragraph. It's okay to split sub-ideas out even a little as well. So the 5-paragraph essay is something we'll explore, but that's also kind of the model that's been around for 100+ years. And we also want to be okay with the fact that sometimes it can be a 6-paragraph or a 7-paragraph essay. That's okay. So the question then becomes, given this, what is the paper that follows going to do? This is now number 1 underneath the explanation of it, the explanatory essay. Well, if we use our context, we know that we're going to be talking about the life of a college student and how it is characterized by time spent studying, attending class, and socializing with peers. So you almost kind of have to just rephrase it a little bit. The paper that follows should explain, because again, it's an explanatory essay, explain how students spend their time studying, attending class, and socializing with peers. So you'll notice how what they did is they did the explanatory, explain how students spend their time, and then they showed what they were going to explain. So the other thing that would be interesting is I would be curious if there was also going to be some details of what a typical college student looks like. I went to Metropolitan State. Metropolitan State is a commuter college, so we're not really typical college students. We travel, we commute, we don't have dorms, we travel from home, we have part-time jobs, sometimes full-time jobs. There's a lot going on there. So that would be an additional layer I might say here. The paper that follows should also explain what a typical college student looks like, because in 2020, it's significantly different in a lot of places. The typical college student isn't the mold that we thought of 20 years ago or even 30 or 40 years ago. It's a different thing. So that's the only fault that I might find on this, but other than that, it's a strong thesis statement. I'm going to let you catch up on your notes if you need to. If you need to pause me, go ahead. So we're going to move now to the argumentative essay thesis, example of an argumentative thesis statement. So here's the statement. High school graduates should be required to take a year off to pursue community college service projects or community service projects before entering college in order to increase their maturity and global awareness. I think that's I don't think a year off. I think maybe a summer activity, because the danger of not going to college, sometimes you get used to not having to go to college, you get used to working. That was my experience. I spent 13 years out of college after going to it for a year, and I sometimes I wonder if I'd gotten back sooner, if I would have been a little bit more ahead of the game when it came to it. But, that's the beauty of hindsight. It's 2020. It also is 2020, the year today. Anyway, moving on. All right, so the question of it is, what is this essay going to tell us, and what should it do? Well, the paper that follows, or essay that follows, should present an argument. Now, again, that's that whole context. It's going to present an argument because it's a argumentative essay. Present an argument and give evidence to support the claim that students should pursue community projects before entering college, because you're arguing why that is important. And there's going to be probably some personal stories. There's probably be some evidence from students who've done that, who have come out stronger and better people and better, right? Like there's all kinds of evidence that you can use depending on what you've got there. And so that's what the argumentative thesis statement should do. Again, when we're evaluating thesis statements, we want to look first for context. What kind of an essay is it? And then that'll give us an answer of what we're going to do. Now, when you eventually start writing your own thesis statements, then yeah, we're going to evaluate it. We're going to make sure they're really clean, real nice and shiny, because we have to be the best writers we can. So if your first thesis statement that you turn into me or that we do in workshop, and it gets kicked back to you and says, hey, do this, don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible writer, I quit, I can't write. No, every great writer in their life has been told, hey, great stuff here, here's some things to work on. And if they gave up and they threw their hands up and said, I'm done being a writer, well, then we've just missed out on the opportunity to see what they have to say. So don't give up on yourself as a writer. Don't feel like you're a terrible writer. Writers are not born. Writers kind of grow, and they learn, and they expand, and they experience, and they revise, and they edit, and they get better, and they get stronger. So don't ever think you can't be a writer. So now it's your turn. So you'll turn to the last page here, and it says, now try to write your own thesis statement. There are Calvin and Hobbs books on your desks in the room. We're going to draft a thesis statement. So go ahead and take a read of Calvin and Hobbs. Maybe take about 15, maybe 20 minutes if you have it. And there's some thesis notes. What I want you to do is I want you to write down stuff that you think that you could either argue, analyze, or explain. So those are the notes you're going to take. And they don't have to be complete sentences. They just got to be little brief notes about like, I'd like to argue this about Calvin, or I want to argue this about Susie, or I want to explain this about whoever. And that can be the thing. So take some notes. Make sure there's some notes in there. Don't just give me one words. Spend some time just kind of analyzing or deciding what you're going to analyze, argue, or explain. Because then what's going to happen is once you've got those notes and an idea, you're then going to write your own thesis statement. And you can decide between an explanatory essay, an argumentative essay, or explain, argue. Oh, I've already forgotten what it is. This is what happens when you I don't know if you've ever had the expression of being in front of a whiteboard ever in school, but you come up to a paper, analyze, there we go, analyze, explain, or argue. You walk up to a whiteboard or to a whatever, and your main mind just suddenly goes blank. That's what sometimes happens is I'm like, and I know what I'm talking about, and it's gone. My brain is empty. And then I have to go, oh, no, now I know what it is. So it sometimes happens where you just kind of go, wow, you forget it. So take some time, make some notes, and then decide if you're going to do an explanatory, argumentative, or analyzing paper. And then you're going to write your own thesis statement. And what I would encourage people to do is if you can't get yourself started, look at the models that we already have here and see if you can adapt them to fit into to a Calvin and Hobbs essay for either analysis, explanatory, or argumentative. And so you may just have to adapt those. But again, give it a try. Take a risk. Try your best, and we'll figure out how to get better at this if you don't do it the first time. And awesome if you do it the first time. That's the beauty of writing. We're always working. We're always under construction. We're always trying to be better at what we do. So that's that. Spend some time working on that. Once you've got all that done, you can turn that in for points, and you have just completed the thesis process. Congratulations. We'll continue on with the next video. I think our next one's probably either introductions or conclusions or argumentative. You know where to find it. It's probably on the playlist. Thanks for watching, and hopefully this definitely helped you as you learn more and more about how to write an essay and be better at it and be stronger writers as we continue to learn how to do that. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one.